Hi there. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about something that kept me drinking for about 10 years longer than I needed to. And that was one of my biggest fears that I really, really couldn't face. I was in my mid 40s, and at the time, I was in a well paid, very stressful job, was a single parent, and I was extremely busy and I was working with some very difficult people. And by then, alcohol had become my support, my defense mechanism, my comfort blanket, my place to hide, you name it. I would get up at the crack of dawn. I would do all the necessary things that I needed to do for that day. I would get the kids off to bed after having dinner with them and being a good mum. I would get them into bed and open a bottle. And most of the time, I would finish the bottle. And some of the time, I might leave a tiny little bit at the bottom and pat myself on the back for being a good girl. I was drinking most nights, but not all. And it was something that I had a growing awareness that this wasn't right. There was something wrong with this, but I couldn't quite name it. And a lot of that was because my brain was just fuzzed up with alcohol. However, I could not contemplate the prospect of giving up because I had this one fear that dominated all the other ones, which was if I stopped drinking, but I failed at it, that I couldn't stay sober for a few days, a week, and I had to go back to drinking, that it would mean that I was an alcoholic. I just couldn't face that fear at all. There is no way that I could have ever acknowledged that for myself. Now, what I know now is that I wasn't an alcoholic. My life wasn't spiraling out of control. I was very much in control. I was making proper meals for the kids. I was living a good life. And everything was just under control. Was I thriving? Of course not. Was I stretching myself? Definitely not. And alcohol was very much my safe space. It was my release. So the prospect of failing at sobriety and having to say to the people I love, to my kids, I'm an alcoholic, or having to get rehab, or telling people in a meeting I'm an alcoholic, it just, it sat in me in completely the wrong way. And I think I can look back now and know that the truth was I wasn't an alcoholic, and that's why it was such a difficult thought. And the reason it was such a difficult thought was because, and we're talking about 20 years ago now, there wasn't the hook grey area drinking that I could hang my hat on. At the time, there were people who successfully moderated, um, and I definitely wasn't one of them. And then there were people who were alcoholics. There wasn't really anything in the middle. And at the time, everybody else in the middle were just normal. Everybody was just normal. Everybody just drank. And if you weren't an alcoholic, that was fine. Your drinking wasn't a problem. When I reached the point of giving up, I was in such a state of distress that I knew that I didn't care what happened next. I just knew I had to stop. But by then, I had a lot more knowledge. I still didn't know that there was such a thing as grey area drinking, but I think I knew myself better. And I'd also spent about the year or two before that, I'd spent about 3 months in a yoga ashram, not drinking. So I knew more than I did back then. And I knew that, well, I definitely knew I could do 3 months, and maybe that if I tried that, it would be okay. And I would prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic. Now, this is in no way disrespectful or judgmental about people who are alcoholics, but I know from working with women just like me that this is a very common fear, that you don't want to stop in case it means that you are this labeled person who is an alcoholic, whose life will be destroyed because of alcohol. And to me, that is the damage that alcohol does. Yes, it's bad for your body, but I think that the worst thing about alcohol is how bad it is for what it does to how you think about yourself. It makes you feel depressed, it makes you anxious, and it certainly did that to me. And it amplified these, what were really occasional thoughts, into real fears, because that's what alcohol does. It makes you think that you are not strong enough to stop. It's like the worst narcissistic relationship you've ever been in. It just tells you a bunch of lies and leaves you hanging all the time. And that feeling of not wanting to quit because I wouldn't have that safety blanket, but B, I would have to say things about myself that weren't true. And I think that was where the mismatch came. That was where the tension was inside me. Because in reality, I knew I wasn't an alcoholic, but I didn't have enough genuine mind clarity to be able to actually figure that out. And I know when I work with women, I hear this quite frequently. And my advice would be, now that you know that there is such a thing as grey area drinking, and that there will be, if you did some research, there's going to be some quite wide definitions, but generally, grey area drinking is you drinking regularly, but generally keeping life under control. It's a lot broader than that, but not. This isn't the video for going into that in any great detail just at the minute. But you know who you are. You know deep down that you're not an alcoholic. You know if you're a grey area drinker. You know you're a grey area drinker because you clicked on this video. Grey area drinking is really easy to overcome, much easier than you think. Of course, I am always going to caveat that with, please go and see your doctor to make sure that you stay safe. But giving up alcohol was the best decision that I ever made for myself. And I've got, at the point of recording this, I've got 9 years of sobriety behind me and a lifetime in front of me. I am so happy to be sober. And it's really interesting to reflect back on those fears, that one in particular, to realize that it just wasn't true. But I just didn't have a clear enough mind to be able to spot it. And if that resonates with you, there's a link in the description box below to a free workbook to give you some support in looking at those fears and really getting the clarity that you need to put them to one side and start your sober journey. So I hope you'll come and join me. It's the best decision I've ever made for myself, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Take care.